Today I've got Brad Brockbank on. We've been connected a couple different ways. We've worked on a couple different things together. But like I was telling you before, and kind of give us your intro again, who you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brad Brockbank, I own a company called the University of U, and it's YOU. So, not the University of Utah, but
We'd be having a different conversation if you owned the U. That'd be pretty slick.
no, but I do executive coaching, and I'm a connector. I love networking and being with amazing people like yourself, and I'm glad to be here today.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. We were together down at Finnegan's. I like to talk about a lot of different things. I want to understand coaching a little bit better, what executive coaching looks like, and I even want to poke some holes in it. I want you to fill them for me, and then I want to talk about connecting and things. But define executive coaching if you could.
Yeah, for sure. So my specific niche, a lot of people think executive coaching and they think, oh, it's like you're teaching them how to be a better executive or how to run their business. My angle, you've got people, and we always hear people with really high IQs, and they run companies and they're great. But there's a whole nother world of EQ, and that's the emotional quotient of how well do they handle their emotions, right? And a lot of times when you're dealing with type A personalities, you'll find a lot of their EQ is very low. They have a high IQ. They're highly intelligent. But when it comes to dealing with people, they really struggle. And being able to teach people how to have a higher EQ coupled with that IQ, that's a powerhouse. Those are people that know how to run companies. They know how to create culture and bring that in. And so I like to think of it as I'm their wingman. They just need a wingman to just bounce things off. Actually, when you look at executives, guys that are high functioning like you and I, we're go, 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 we've got things all the time. What I found and discovered is that there's essentially this pack that we carry around as men. And women, I'm sure, have something similar to it, but really in the space of entrepreneurial, like high functioning men. This pack that we carry, we go to work and we get crap that we get handed, and it's like, okay, now I'm going home. I don't want to take that. So we stick it in the pack, right? And then we go home and we're dealing with family and life, and there's things the kids are doing and things that we can't take to work. So where does it go? It goes in the pack. And as we age and we've got this pack, it gets heavier and heavier until it gets to a point where suddenly midlife crisis, because the pack's too heavy and people are sick and tired of carrying it. And so now they go off the deep end or whatever, however their midlife crisis manifests itself, because this pack has a bunch of crap that's never been dealt with. And so I come in, and that's what I do is I start working with them. We start digging around and saying, what's painful? What's not working in life? What do you need to reassess to be able to keep moving forward? And so we unpack that and make some really cool things happen.
Well, talk about it. So would you say that process is like therapy, or is it more business? I mean, how does that process look? Because I'll tell you, so for myself, I'm youngish, and things, I've got a company that's doing real well, performance windows and things. What I've often thought, everybody tells me, my wife and every person around me says, yeah, you should go to therapy and work some of that stuff out, because I'm just not an emotional person. I just, when I was growing up, my dad would sit across the table from me and say, hey, you're not allowed to talk to me until you stop crying. And then I'd catch myself saying that to my kids, like, hey, stop crying. I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. But my wife, maybe 2 times in my entire life, she's seen me cry, and I even dispute those. And it's not that I hold things back. It's just I don't feel those things. So often when people are telling me, well, you should go to therapy and work those out, I think to myself, well, one, things are going so well that I don't want to rock the boat. And 2, there's the ego that gets in of what could that person, I'm a financially successful person. What could this person tell me? Get into ego of it. unpack all that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and their points well taken. Like we as men, we're supposed to be strong and like have our crap together and all that. And it's definitely there. In therapy, therapy has its place without question. Therapy really does a good job of going back in the past and looking at things like, oh, your dad like telling you like toughen up, you don't cry. And like there's wounds that like happen there because it's like, well, why don't I cry? Why can't I cry? Right? That inner child, that's what that thinks. But now at this stage, later in life, as you've developed and had all those things come together, you're saying, no, I need to be tough. I need to be strong. I don't cry. That's never been a part of me. So therapy does a great job of working through those things in the past. Where coaching comes in, it really wants to look forward. Not that there's not a therapeutic element of coaching, but remember, coaches are not licensed therapists. And that's why, especially like when I'm coaching, a lot of times this trauma will come up or things like that. And I just have to say, let's pause there, because that's something that you probably really do need to unpack with a licensed therapist who's been through schooling and things like that. Now, my coaching, I've been doing this for 20 years. You start to learn a thing or two, but you still have to be careful to not cross those lines or muddy the waters. But man, as people look at their goals and they start looking forward, that's what you and I have been raised on, right? All the books, all the mentors, all the conferences we go to. You start to get this vision and dream, but how do I get my dream? How do I get my goals? And when you're working with a coach, that's exactly how. So you're at the top of your game, right? You're like, you've got a successful company, but think about Michael Jordan. He didn't ever say like, I don't need a coach.
Right.
He knew that coach would come in from the outside and look at what he's doing and how can he improve, even though he's, I'll say something really controversial here, the GOAT. We'll see how many riots I start. But even at the top of his game, he still had his coach to look at, assess, call out, and help him continue to try to improve even what he's already doing. So that's really, as your listeners are thinking like, gosh, should I look at coaching? Should I consider something like that? Yes, absolutely. I have a coach. Here I am 20 years into it, and I have mentors that I go to. I call Sean Finnegan all the time, and like, Sean, I'm dealing with this, X, Y, and Z. What are your thoughts? And we just spitball through things. We talk. What about this? Have you thought about that? It's so helpful. It makes me feel like I'm not in this journey all by myself.
Okay, here's one of the main problems I have with therapy. This will just be an entire episode about me bashing therapy. Just kidding. But here's one of my issues with therapy is it's like if I got some kind of sickness or illness or something, I go to a doctor so that they can fix it so that I can be done with that sickness. Oftentimes, therapy, and I've got, which is so funny because I'm hypocritical because every time there's somebody around me, like, especially younger than me, I'm like, yeah, you should go to therapy and I'll pay for it because you got all those problems that, whatever it is. But it's like a lifelong prescription. It's, to me, if it doesn't fix it, if it's not done, then it's just, it's not a fix. It's is there ever an end to, you give the Jordan example, but is there ever an end to coaching? For me, I thrive so hard on, I wouldn't say finish lines, but the next step, the next growth, the next progress. Is there that?
I think yes and no. So each individual coach that you bring into your life and that you start working with will bring a certain set of skills and structures that you'll learn. And you'll get to a point where you'll start to feel like, you know what, I kind of feel like I've got this. And at that point, that's a good indicator that you're probably ready to go to the next level. And I recently heard on a podcast I was listening to, somebody said, if you're coaching with somebody who doesn't have a coach, you need to rethink it. So I like I just mentioned, I have a coach myself that I work with, And the reason I do that is because I want to stay at the top of my game. I want to continue to progress because I can only get my clients and people I'm working with so far. But if I continue to grow and I continue to increase, then I have more to offer them. But even at that stage, like one of my clients, I worked 3 years with them, and we got kind of that 3-year mark, and it was kind of like, we've been doing this for a while now. And it was clear that it was time for them to go and find a new mentor with some of the different skill sets that I wasn't working on or teaching them, and that's fine. So they went out and found. But what's interesting is now we're probably 4.5 years or so down the line from when we started, and they call me frequently just to touch base, catch up, and it's really good because they miss those things. So,
do you find it difficult? How can I phrase this? The thing is, when I'm around billionaires, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure you coach and have done coaching with people that financially have done huge things, bigger things. And you're not necessarily telling them how to make business decisions. You're just helping them, holding them accountable, giving them insights that they didn't have, maybe a lot of those things, which is relevant and important. But how do you, when you're going to connect with somebody, because I've got a lot of people that will reach out to me, and I'll go out to lunch with them and I'll let them pick my brain and things, and I don't think about making a business with because it's just so how do you differentiate between this is a homie that I'm giving some advice to and, well, I should be charging for this. This is a client.
Yeah. No, I think on that spectrum, it really is like the formalized agreement comes after they get comfortable and like, you know what? I should probably be paying you for the advice you're giving me.
Yeah.
There's definitely a big, clear point where that comes. And if somebody is like picking my brain all the time and it feels laborious,
Yeah.
I'll just bring up that conversation. Like, hey, I'd love to hire you as a client, or have you hire me as a client. And so we breached that. But I think another piece in the question that you may have been getting towards also is like, as a coach, how does somebody who, clearly has not made $1 billion coach a billionaire? Why would they even want to listen to what I have? And there's a principle that one of my mentors taught me called the freeway principle. And it's because you get, when you're dealing with these guys, right now I'm coaching a really incredible client who works with a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. He's making millions and millions of dollars. And on that freeway principle, if we're driving down the road and you look ahead of you, you've got cars way ahead of you, right? And no matter how fast I drive, there will always be cars ahead of me, no matter what. But when I look in the rearview mirror, there's also cars behind me. And all those cars behind me, they want to know how I got to where I'm at, right? So when we look at the principle, what is it called? Imposter syndrome. When we have imposter syndrome, if you look, the people behind you, they want to know. And those people that are ahead of you, I know that maybe in the financial world, they're ahead of me. But I also know that when it comes to relationships and connections and things like that, I feel like I'm probably one of the wealthiest people in the world. I've just been really blessed to know and understand how to cultivate relationships. And so I know at that level, I can help them. And I also know that there's a lot of these really high-performing executives, they're at the top, and they don't answer to anybody. And what happens is because of that, you get surrounded by a lot of yes men and people that are just like, and occasionally you'll have people that will argue with you or say, here's a new perspective, but it's rare. And so what these executives really value, they find a lot of benefit and value with is being able to have somebody that's asking them hard questions. So they'll come and say, hey, I've got this situation. And then you start picking it apart in a way that is good. I don't pick it apart just to be mean or to say, well, you didn't do this or you haven't thought about that. I don't purport to know how to run anybody's business. I just know how to ask good pointed questions that help them figure out how to better run their business.
You know what it is, honestly, and I there was a time where, business coaches and life coaches and different coaches, disdain, not the right word, didn't have disdain. I wrote them off a little bit, and then I had a couple. I had a kid on here. His name was Kevin. Who was that, Diego? The Fighting Normalcy or whatever. Kevin something, moved down to Mexico. I forget his name. But anyway, I had him on, and he was new to life coaching things. And then he said a couple things. I was like, oh, I like that. And to me, it was a lot like, so what it actually is just a mastermind, right? It's just that you've read your books and had your experiences and had your mentors. I've had mine and mine and mine. But inevitably, as we sit here and have a conversation, you will say something. I'm like, oh, I like that. Let's actually expand on that, whatever. Just because you've got different life experiences, different things. I guess one thing that I'm sure has to be super heavy in your business is books, right? I mean, got to do a ton of reading. For me, I try to do 50 books a year. I fall short every year, but I still get in about 20 to 30 books per year. And I try to always make it, business, nonfiction books. And the way I read books, it's been obviously I don't sit down and read them. I play them in the car or on in my AirPods as I'm on a plane.
Yeah.
I'm always traveling. But the way that I consume books is with the purpose of just listening, and then honestly, one or two or three things will pop out. And if you ask me about this book, I can tell you something that stood out to me about that book and that book and that book, something that I still will go on in my teachings. And so I'll see a lot of people, and they'll just be amazed that I sit there and listen to books. But, most of it, honestly, it just kind of goes through, and then one or two things stick out. How important is consuming literature to you and what you do and to your life?
Yeah, no, I think, going back to your earlier question about is there an end? I don't think for people at the highest levels of performance, I don't think there's an end where they say, okay, I'm done coaching. They're constantly reading books. They're constantly going to seminars. They're constantly networking. They're constantly looking to develop themselves and their network. And in the book world, that's one of the most critical things. Yeah, I think that I'm like you. I don't read a lot of fiction. Nonfiction, self-help, improvement type of books. That's my jam. I love that. And I'm the same. I don't do a great job sitting down and reading a book. Usually I start falling asleep when I'm trying to read a book. So I use Audible in the car. It's like, boom, it's the first thing that comes on. When I drive long trips, I love driving through the middle of the night. I just flip on an audiobook. My wife's asleep, kids are asleep, and I can just listen and just. The only thing that freaks my wife out is if I'm trying to keep notes.
Do you take notes? Because that's something I always wish I'd do. Is I wish I'd jot down notes, but I just keep going and I kind of store whatever will really stick with me.
I have a book actually that I carry that it's just a little notebook. It's almost like a journal. And when I know I'm going to be listening to a book and doing a long drive or things like that, I keep that in the car with me. And any gems that really stick out that I feel, when you hear them, those things are
wow.
Oh, dude, I need that in my life. So I'll just make a couple quick notes, and then I try to go back and revisit that. And I read through that book all the time, just flipping through my notes. And it's one of the coolest books I have, just because it has so much wisdom.
And I've started so many of those. I went on a mission, an LDS mission, and I wrote my journal every single day. I've got 2 years straight of without missing a day. And then the second I got home, when you're on your mission, like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I didn't do that. So I keep starting books to do it. Maybe it's my own ADHD that kicks in, but do you feel like you ever go back and review them, or is it just a tool for you to, when you write it down, it solidifies it better for you? What?
I find the same thing. It's hard to go back, and I have a Audible library that's to be desired. It has so many books in it. And as I go back through, like you were saying, you can pick a couple things out of what you liked. I don't even know that I have even that much where I could be like books that I read last year and go back and say, oh yeah, this stood out to me. This stood out to me. Sometimes it almost feels like the principles are crossed over and it's like, wait, who talked about getting the right butts in the right seats on the bus? And who's like all the different concepts, they just start to muddle. But what's really cool is that muddlement, if you will, that puddle that's in the middle is yours. And it starts to form who you are and how you do business. And then that's why when a coach comes along and you're like, okay, well, I'm doing this and this and this and this. And they go, well, what about, have you thought about that? And it's like, oh, that clicked. All of a sudden, some of those concepts that you've been mulling through and working over, they just, boom, and it comes together. And that's what's really cool. Well, you talked about it and said it's kind of like a mastermind. That's exactly what it is. It's a mastermind between two people to be able to look at the future rather than therapy where we're going back to the past and we're dealing with some of those traumas. We're looking at connecting the future and making those goals and pushing harder.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I want your 3 favorite books, and favorite's tough, but 3 that come to top of mind, and then 1 book that controversially you hate, that everybody loves. I only set that up because I know exactly which book I hate.
Okay. I would say probably Into the Magic Shop is one of my absolute favorite. It's all about mindset. It's written by a neurosurgeon. He talks a bit about the science behind it as well. So I love that. I would definitely say for years and years.
And before that, talk about Into the Magic Shop. What stuck out to you there?
Into the Magic Shop, it's the first nonfiction book that I've read that has a storyline to it. So it talks about when he was a little kid, he goes into this magic shop. I don't want to ruin the whole the book. Honestly, it's one of the very best books. I think mostly because it became one that I couldn't put down. Like there's breaks in most of the nonfiction books that you're just like, okay, I'll stop here and I'll continue. This one was really, really hard for me to like pause and put down. And I went back and listened to it 3 times afterwards, shortly in a short amount of time, because I was just so enthralled with how good the content was and the storyline. It was a storyline that really captivated me. So yeah, that one I love, and I would recommend like so much to your readers, especially if they have a hard time with the nonfiction.
Okay.
Because it has all the elements. Yeah.
Okay, boom. Into the Magic Shop.
Fantastic book. So the next one, I would say How to Win Friends and Influence People. We talked earlier in the podcast about having a higher EQ. Mm-hmm. And I would say that How to Win Friends and Influence People definitely taps on what does it take to increase your EQ. And it's not even as much as like making friends, but knowing what the other side of a conversation might be thinking. I love how he peels back the different layers and helps you really see into the minds of others and what they might be experiencing when you do X, Y, or Z, or how you approach life. So that book is I used to call it my Bible next to my Bible.
Yep.
So
Number 3, I
would say another great book, I'll mix it up just a little bit, is called Lincoln on Leadership. And it's a bit of a biography about Abraham Lincoln and some of the different things that he did. Again, another really cool EQ type of book. It has some really neat principles, and as you peer into especially the Civil War Lincoln, and what he was going through and like where the country was divided and how much was going on there. I revere that man. Wow, what an incredible leader.
That was Lincoln on Leadership?
Yeah.
Okay, now give us your hot take. A book that everybody lauds and you hate.
Gosh, I don't know that there's many books I hate. Usually if I don't like them, I've already quit it before I finished it.
That's my problem, is that once I start reading it, angrily so, I must finish it so that I can properly hate this author. But you'll stop. You'll stop early.
I stop. If it's just not resonating with me, I kind of operate at a level where I'm just like, if it doesn't vibe, I'm out.
Okay.
Like even with people, with like business deals, if I'm not feeling the vibe, I just don't want to waste any of my time down things. So there have been. I'm trying to think of some of the books I've quit. There was one called Entrepreneur. I'll have to look it up on my phone, but maybe we can come back to that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me give you my 3, and then I actually
I'd love to hear yours.
I got 2 books that everybody loves, and I hate them.
Okay. Well, maybe
because
I'll
for me,
be
I
with you.
remember when I was in high school, I used to get grounded for a long time. Like I get grounded for like 2 months at a time.
Oh.
Like I'd be allowed to come out for bathroom, and they'd bring me my meals. Yeah. So.
And they'd hold you to it.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Because I was a little bastard. But maybe I should work that out in therapy. But I remember there was this one book, and this has nothing to do with what I'm about to talk about. But it was, you remember that they made it into a movie. It's called The Lovely Bones with Mark Wahlberg.
Yep.
Reading it, I got stuck reading it, and I hated the way it was. The movie was cool, but I hated the way it was written, and I had to finish it. And ever since then, when I start a book, it just makes me angry that I've read the first 3 chapters, that I got to finish it so that I could just at least get the value out of having finished another book. So 3 that I love, and there's a lot, actually. There's a lot. But 3 that I love is Richest Man in Babylon. That is
Fantastic book.
Yeah, there's some real things that come out of there about if you live like a slave or you live like an owner or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I love what's his name? But it's Winning by Tim Grover.
Yeah.
He was the trainer for Kobe and D Wade and Michael Jordan, and what he does is he personifies winning. What's it called when you give something inanimate life? It's not called humanize. It's called I forget the word, but basically he takes an inanimate object and makes it like it's a living thing, and he does that with winning. That winning actually hates you, and you're going to take your whole life trying to get winning, trying to chase winning. When you watch Kobe or Michael Jordan cry over the trophy, they're not crying about having achieved that thing. They're crying about all the hours it took to do this thing, everything in their life that it took. He talks about it. Oh, I'm going to get emotional. But he talks about this his little boy coming up as he's packing up his bag, and he's like, don't go, and he's like, I have to go, right? And personification. No, that's not the word. It's a different word. Giving life to inanimate object. It's not called personification. Look it up. We'll figure that out. I'm fighting with... Yeah, anthropomorphize. Yeah, I don't know. I'm fighting with my Colombian editor. Neither of us know English. But it was really... Because that is what we do, It's tough. Is like... When I was growing up, my father, he worked on movies, and he'd be away for 4 or 5 months at a time. And so I promised myself I'd never be away. Still, I travel a lot, but I'm away for 2-3 days at a time. But my kids, they say, Daddy, don't go. And I think to myself, I'd love the opportunity to work a 9 to 5. But with Performance Windows and with my other ventures, they've given me opportunities to change my family tree, right? Now, I wrestle with it constantly because, it's like in the Bible. What good does it do a man to gain the world and lose his soul, right?
Right.
But also it's my responsibility to provide, right? I dropped out of college, but the only thing I ever took from my business ethics class is that it is your ethical responsibility to provide the most value to the shareholders. And in my life, the shareholders are my wife and children. And they hold stock in what I'm doing, right? And so I've got this responsibility to go out and do everything I can to give them everything, while still I also have the responsibility to be around, right? And I think about that all the time is how do you weigh those two responsibilities of providing the most that you can for not just my wife and children, but also the people who hold stock in me is everybody who works for me. I've got north of 200 employees that if I just decide I can't do this anymore and I crumbled and Levi crumbled, that's 200 plus all their families plus everybody who relies on them. And so it's such a weighty responsibility. Sometimes I'll walk up to a gas station and it'll say, now hiring night shift, $12 an hour. I'm like, oh man, that'd be cool, because all you gotta do is mop the floor and check out a couple people. Because it's just such a mental load off your plate. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, it's like I now even have a hard time going on vacation. If I'm on vacation longer than 4 or 5 days, I got to get back, because you got to go, and you just want to be at what you're good at. I'm great at being a father, great at being a husband sometimes. But in reality, the truth is, right, I hear kids all the time tell me, I want to retire by the time I'm 35 or whatever it is. And I tell them, I say, I promise you, if you have the financial ability to retire by the time you're 35, you won't do it, because what it took you to be able to work hard enough to make that kind of money, it will become ingrained in your soul. When you retire, you expire. So, Winning by Tim Grover, that was a great one. And then, of course, life changing for me was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. One of the great. I read that once a year because it's just one of the coolest effing books. I cannot get over Shoe Dog. You've read Shoe Dog?
Yeah.
Oh, life-changing, right?
Grew up across the river there in Vancouver, so Portland is all...
Just like you talk about, that's a nonfiction that reads as a story.
Yeah.
And it's gripping. I mean, that one, I love Shoe Dog. Just because it's like... Did you ever see that movie with Jonah Hill called War Dogs?
I don't know that I have.
They're gun runners and they're idiots. And they get stuck running through the triangle of death in like Benghazi or something, right? And the Taliban's chasing behind them. And they just barely get over the line. And I think about that all the time. Is like, what was my Benghazi run? What was where could it have all gone wrong? Took a big risk and did it, right? And I think that's a lot of people in their life. They face that chance to risk it, and they don't. And you got to risk it to get the biscuit, And it's. Have you seen a lot of people in your life not take that risk and they regret it?
Oh, yeah. Especially when they get later in life and they feel like they're living an unauthentic life because they missed taking those chances. They stayed in the safe zone. They didn't push themselves, and they have a lot of regret. Yeah, it's really hard to see the regret in the eyes of men who wish they had done something a little bit different. But it's, what it really drives, what drives those decisions is, of course, fear, right? Fear of failure, but it's really the judgment. They're afraid to take the leap because of the judgment that will come from friends, family, and all the different things. So they just stay in their safety zone and keep working their 9 to 5. And oh man, who wants to be at 65 years old working the same job? Although there's lots of men who do, more than don't.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's what I've always said is one of the greatest aspects or one of the greatest pieces you'd need as a male is a wife who supports you. And it's not just a wife who supports you saying you can do it, but it's a wife who trusts you to go do the things you do. With my first child, when my child was being born, it was 3 days before my first child was going to be born. I walked out of a job and quit to go do something else. Came home, told my wife. She's like, oh, that's not great. And I did some job hopping there. And then with my second child, my son, it was 3 days. I was working at a tech company here, at a health plan, all these things. And I said, I'm going to go open this company, Performance Windows. And she was 3 days from having the kids. She's like, don't do it. I said, I think I got it. And then she said, okay, absolutely, go do it. And without that, what I caution every person who works for me, be it a male or a female, is that make sure your spouse is on board, not with specifically Performance Windows, but with your ability to make decisions. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going home and fighting just to be able to, you're fighting too many wars. It's too many fronts, Yeah. What's your thought on that?
The mental load of fighting with a spouse, it's crippling. And here's the interesting thing. When I work with these men, a lot of times they will, as we talk, why are you crushing so hard? Why are you working 16, 20 hours a day? and hardly sleeping. You're go, 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 go all the time. You're missing out on your children's games. You're missing out on the important events. You're not going on vacation, like different things like that. And when you really start to dig down, the reason behind it is always, well, I'm doing it for my family. I'm working so hard because I want to give them a better life than I had. So then we take the other side and we go talk to the wife. And she's like, I just want my husband. Forget the money. Like, you can have the money. I just want my husband back. And so that brings a really interesting quandary that you've got to really look at and say, okay, and I want your listeners to self-evaluate and assess right now. Are you living that life where you are crushing it? Go, 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 go all the time for your family, but you're not present. If that's where you're at, you need to reassess and you need to shift some things because your family needs not the money. They need you. They need your influence. They need your love. They need your encouragement and support. And all that energy, when we think about, okay, that load of fighting with the wife, like there's a lot of energy that's carried with that. All the energy that you're putting into your business, the time, the effort, the energy for what? For them. Imagine if you were to take a piece of that and pour it back into the family. You want ROI? There's where your biggest ROI is going to come.
Let me push back on some points here. And
Yeah.
I want you to push back the other way. In my mind, if I was talking to a buddy about this problem or whatever it is, how do I say this without getting myself in trouble? I think sometimes people don't know what they want, right? Let me use a wife, for example. A wife doesn't. When I was being a lazy bum and I was home all the time, my wife was like, "Can you get the hell out of here? Go to work, blah blah blah." Right?
Right.
And when I would be away too much, it's, "Hey, you're not home enough." Right? I think for sure you gotta have quality time, right? You can't be away too long. You gotta be there. You gotta be going to the sporting events. You gotta be having defined play, especially with the kids. I mean, the kids and your wife for sure. However, I think one of the best things that they can have is a father or a husband who is fulfilled, right? If I go out and I'm just grinding and building and being able to have this sense of fulfillment, then my children will also know what it is to not have a father who's regretting of himself, who's mad at himself. It's the same reason why, my mom wasn't a stay-at-home mom, and I've got nothing against stay-at-home moms. But I think to myself, my wife doesn't need to work, but I want her to go work and do something, be it a hobby or something, because I want my daughters to want to be out there and doing something. I don't want my wife's only title to have been wife and mother. Right. And so don't you think there's some real pushback and credibility to the idea that he's out there building something, he's got a sense of accomplishment, and therefore I can be proud of my dad? Or do you think that gets taken too far?
No, I think so. The question that I would come back with at that is, are you fighting with your wife? Right? Mm-hmm. If you're fighting with your wife because you're gone too much, then maybe there's an imbalance. Or if your kid, you're able to provide them to go to the camps and to all the things, but if you're not there with them, is it worth, how much are you willing to trade? Yeah, you're making millions, which is great, but there's a quality of life that starts to degrade unless you have like a winning the lottery type of, Qualtrics exit type of thing. And then you get to choose a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, for most men, there's a balance that has to be struck in trying to be present and also crushing it and getting out there. So making sure that you are using your time with intention in whatever you're doing, that I think is a major ticket. Intentionality. What are you doing? Are you focused and present on your job when you're at your job? And then do you hang that up when you walk back in the door and you're there for the kids and you I know exactly how much sleep I need every night. If I don't get my 6.5 hours, I'm going to have a struggle the next day. So I'm really intentional about making sure I get to bed on time. And if I don't get to bed on time, I'm intentional about adjusting my sleep schedule and my morning routine the next morning so that I get my 6.5 hours of sleep. Because I know if I stay intentional about what I'm doing, my outcome will be the things that I intend to have outcomes as. So going back to those relationships, if you're not happy and you feel like you're just like grinding, and the question is, what am I grinding for? If that's resonating in your mind, you need to get intentional and figure out, what are you grinding for? And should I be more present for my kids? Should I be more present for my wife? Or am I not grinding hard enough and being intentional when I'm at my job? If I were to do that, could I hit some bigger goals? Could I hit some higher benchmarks?
Okay, I like it. Okay, let me give you my 2, and I want you to hate my options of the books I hate. I want you to love them so you can tell me why I shouldn't hate them. It's 2. 1, Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss.
Okay.
Do you like it?
I've read it, and I like it.
I hated it. I don't know why, but it was just something about, I don't know. It was something about it almost reminded me of, I didn't hate Jocko's book. What's it called? Accountability.
I know which one you're talking. I can't think of the name.
Jocko something, but basically Extreme Ownership.
Oh, yes, Extreme Ownership. That's right.
I didn't hate it, but it's just so over the top of war. This is how it is in business. This is how you relate it. And that's what Voss is that it almost, things felt so over the top and hostage situation. So this is how you do it in business. Right? And to me, it's like I would love to hear fitness and, mindset from a Navy SEAL, but it's hard to then get business training from some of these people that to me, it didn't translate. For
right.
you enjoyed it though? Tell me why I'm wrong. And it's been a while since I read it.
Never Split the Difference. So before I became a coach, back in the day, I was pretty certain that I was destined to be Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Like I was going FBI. I was like full in on that. That was my life to be. And I got back from my mission. I got married 2 months after I got home. I'd known my wife in high school. It's a great story I'll have to share sometime. But we got married, and I was like, the best route for me to kind of get down that route is to go into the police academy. And she sat me down as I got more serious about it. She realized I really was pretty serious about this route. And she said, I can't live a life where every day I kiss you goodbye and wonder if this is the last time I'm going to kiss you goodbye. And so, this was one of those like sit downs, like we're having a real conversation, not just kind of a passing. So I had to make a decision. And ultimately I made the right decision, I think, and chose my wife and her sanity. And I didn't pursue that. And the choice of that, I've always wondered, like, what would life be if I were to go back and I could have had that adventurous, like, bad guy chasing and being the total amazing guy that comes out and, like, knows exactly where to shoot and how to shoot and all that stuff. I love that type of stuff. So as I read the book, I think the fact that he was a hostage negotiator, and then another thing that you're probably picking up I like a lot is having a high EQ. Mm-hmm. So emotionally, what's happening in the mind of that bad guy that he's negotiating with? And then when it gets to the part of the book where he talks about like negotiating a car, I was just like, okay. And I think this is probably why I liked the book as much as I did, is I was right at a point where I was going to buy a car. Yeah. And I went in and I totally used the tactics from it, and it totally like landed, and I got a really smoking deal on it. And I was like, that book is awesome. Yeah. So I think that's why I liked it as much. I can definitely though see where you're coming from on the other part, because like even the Extreme Ownership, I agree. I've read a number of books written by Navy SEALs, and I think if you haven't lived that boot camp and then the extreme conditions that they get trained under and where they build the brass that they have to be as amazing as they are, when you don't have that and you're trying to like mentally live and experience and like translate those things, I think it's a pretty big push for a lot of us, myself included.
Yeah, it's suspension of disbelief is the wrong term, but basically, it's cool. I mean, every guy's like, "Oh, that's badass."
Yeah.
But I just would have the hardest time saying some of the things that he was saying to say in deals because my life is sales. So I guess it's my own specific sale that I'm like, I couldn't do that. Okay, the last one, and I know we're getting close there, and I need you to push back on it, but I hated this book. And I read the whole thing, Think and Grow Rich. Tell me you loved it.
It's a great book. I know everybody goes back to it. I'd say I'm midline, whether I hated it or not.
The one part that really, it was all kind of slow. It's older talk, which was funny. I thought I was done with Napoleon Hill, but then I read Conversations with the Devil or whatever.
Outwitting the Devil.
Outwitting, great book.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible book. Loved that book. But him, especially when he got into like the chapter where he's talking about harnessing your sexuality or something, I'm like, come on, brother, it's too much.
Yeah, no, I kind of feel that same way. Like everybody was like, oh man, that's such an awesome book, and I get like the principles that they're teaching, and it's very much a part of what I teach in a lot of different aspects. But yeah, I think the sexuality part it was weird.
Yeah, it was weird. It was just a weird, maybe that's what threw me off. Talking about getting to work with Carnegie and do all those things. I do honestly believe, genuinely, I was very much against the hokey pokey, if you believe, achieve, all these things. And then I would watch that I wanted to be able to do. I do a lot of stuff right now with the UFC. I've got a business partner, Henry Cejudo, who's a double champ in the UFC. And I grew up watching the UFC. And when I started Bad Bet, one of the early things that Diego and I talked about was being able to be involved with the UFC and do things. And then it's strange how it in your brain like, that's crazy how that just happened. And it's like where attention goes, results follow, and where intention goes. But so I do firmly believe that, when you desire something and think about it and go after it over and over again, it feels like it just magically happens. But something about the book just rubbed me wrong. What's a big part, and like I said, we're getting close there, but touch on that point of when you've seen people have the intention to do something and it kind of almost seemingly falls in their lap through what is not just falling in their lap.
Yeah, I love the saying. It's kind of similar to what you just shared, but what you think about, you bring about.
Yeah.
Right? And when we talk about that intentionality, that focus, for years and years, I've really tried to define in my own life, what is faith? We talk about faith in God, faith in like yourself. And what I've come to determine, faith is what you spend your time and intentionality focused on. Like, really, when you start to break it down, just where your focus is, that's what you're putting your faith or that faith particle in, those outcomes. Now, what's interesting is if you think about somebody who spends a lifetime studying or working on one singular problem, odds are they're probably going to make a breakthrough. They're probably going to discover it before they die. And even in the situations where people could bring to the table and say, well, this guy did, almost all of them have had somebody subsequently take their research and discover the principle that they've been pursuing. And so in your life, if you have an outcome that you want and you really put your intention and your focus on it and you keep working at it and you keep going, a lot of people stop 3 feet from gold. You know that story, right? Yep. They sold the gold mine and the new people bought it and they started digging and it was 3 feet and they hit the largest gold vein in the world. So, there is definitely that intentionality. It's hard though, as an entrepreneur. The UFC thing didn't come easy, did it? Mm-mm. No, it was a lot of work. You guys had to build, you had to get your brand, you had to be doing all the things, and then suddenly it fell into place. Yeah. But it's that iceberg principle where people just see the tip. They're like, oh my gosh, you went and got a UFC thing. Like, you're amazing. That's so cool. Yeah. But they don't see all the work and the effort and the time. That's where the intentionality is built.
Overnight success, years in the making.
That's right.
Well, Brad, it's been incredible. Tell people where they can find you and what you got going on.
Yeah, you can check us out at it's uofyou.org. That's our website, and you can follow me on just about any social media platform. LinkedIn's a big one. Just look up Brad Brockbank, connect with me. I love connecting with new people. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and feel free to reach out with questions or anything like that.
Love it. Guys, this is an incredibly fun one. Follow this man. More to come.